The easternmost Nordic member of the European Union, Finland, is navigating a bold new direction in foreign policy. Historically known as a bastion of military neutrality, the country has now pivoted towards closer ties with the West through its accession to NATO.
The decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members demonstrates that NATO's door is open. It demonstrates that President Putin did not succeed in closing NATO's door. NATO's door remains open. And it also demonstrates that we respect the sovereign right of every nation to choose their own path. So we, of course, respected Finland and Sweden when they decided to stay out of NATO for many, many years. But then we also welcome them and respect their decision to join NATO.
This strategic realignment, taking in Sweden as well, comes in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine that sent a chill wind across Europe. It was felt most acutely by Baltic states like Estonia, along with Stockholm and Helsinki.
NATO line is the only line that Russia wouldn't cross. And this was the question that we had to ask ourselves when Russia invaded, attacked brutally Ukraine. I'm also very glad that we have been able to work so closely with Sweden during the process. And of course we see that both Finland and Sweden not only will have made this decision for our own interest.
But this quest for greater security has come at a cost. Finland says Russia has increased its espionage activities, carried out cyberattacks and spread disinformation. National elections loom next spring, in which the prospect of possible Russian interference looms. Meanwhile, hundreds of asylum seekers from Africa and the Middle East have crossed Finland's eastern border in recent months. A wave of migration deliberately directed there, the government says, by Russia to cause instability. In parallel developments, the war on Gaza shines an uncomfortable light on Finland's defence procurement. The opposition has called for the scrapping of a $345 million deal to purchase Israel's David's Sling air defence system. The government insists it will go ahead. Helsinki vocally condemns violence in the region and supports a two-state solution, but its willingness to trade arms with Israel raises some nuanced questions about the consistency of its foreign policy. To discuss that and more, Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen talks to Al Jazeera. Elina Valtonen, the Foreign Minister of Finland, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
It's a fascinating time, isn't it, for Finnish foreign policy? Your country earlier this year abandoning a long-standing policy of military neutrality between East and West in the face of a perceived threat from your neighbour Russia after its invasion of Ukraine in 2022, now close to signing a defence cooperation agreement with the United States. Clearly no trace of that neutrality remains. Finland has firmly taken sides. Am I right?
Well, in a way, Finland has taken sides long time ago. We have been a stable democracy for over 100 years, and every time in history there's been an opportunity to edge towards the West, we've taken that opportunity. And for instance, we've been a member of the European Union for 3 decades now, and we have also been closely cooperating with NATO over the course of the past decade, ever so close that by the time we sent in the application for joining the alliance, our military was almost 100% interoperable with NATO. So yes, indeed, we have chosen side, and we are now in the family of friends of other members of the European Union, where we belong.
In the face, though, of, as I said, a perceived threat from Russia, do you believe, does your government really believe that President Putin has an interest, has designs on a country like Finland, a member, as you say, of the European Union?
It's not so much a function of whether we perceive an immediate military threat from Russia. It's more that we want to contribute to the strength of the security architecture in Europe, and do that together with our friends and now allies. So it's definitely that. And of course, Finland has always invested strongly into its own defense, and we indeed have not felt an immediate military threat from Russia or from elsewhere.
The Kremlin recently described it as Russophobia. Is that what it's about?
Well, not at all. Finland, well, first of all, we have never been a threat to Russia. On the contrary, we have, in the history, we have had to defend ourselves against the aggression from Russia. Luckily, we have been able to remain independent also during the two wars in the Second World War, where Russia invaded Finland. So, and now as members of NATO, it's exactly the same. We are not there to threaten anybody. We do have many Russian-speaking people in Finland, and also people with the Russian nationality. And these people are a valuable part of our society, and there's definitely no sign of Russophobia in this country whatsoever. But it has to be said that especially ever since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there has been, not only in Finland but also in the European Union, a very rigid position, which means that there is no political contact with Russia. We have imposed sanctions towards Russia, and we have, of course, been aiding Ukraine in their defense, where they are protecting their own sovereignty and territorial integrity, which they have the right to based on the UN Charter.
Well, the Kremlin was pretty clear, wasn't it, in the face of your plans to join NATO, that it would consider such a step, an aggressive one. President Sauli Niinisto of Finland said that your country should be prepared for, quote, certain malice from Russia in return. Has that sort of response manifested itself?
Well, Finland is a sovereign country, and we are free to align ourselves with other countries, again, not posing any threat towards anybody. Well, Russia has also said many times that to them it was not a surprise that Finland joined NATO, since we had been very closely cooperating anyway. And as members of the European Union, of course, just choosing the same security architecture like our fellow member states have done. And in that respect, if Finland was a military threat to Russia, why have they moved all their troops away from the western border towards Finland? Indeed, they have done so for their war of aggression in Ukraine, and clearly they are not seeing any military threat from Finland.
Yet they haven't stood still, have they? They have responded in the face of your moves towards NATO in the form of increased espionage. Your intelligence services say so, cybersecurity threats, and so on. There's an election due in the spring of next year, as indeed there is in Russia. You've got that 80,000 strong, as you said, Russian-speaking population. Are you concerned about what Russia can do in terms of spreading disinformation, in terms of interfering with your election, in terms of ongoing efforts to disrupt your cybersecurity?
Well, these actions of malice, these unfortunately are nothing new. These are actions that Russia has been undertaking towards several, or if not all, European Union countries over the course of the past years. So it's not our position to speculate whether some of their actions are in response to, for instance, Finland joining NATO or making other moves that we can do as a sovereign nation. We are, of course, prepared. We have invested into our defense, into our deterrence, together with our partners and allies, and we just hope that, for instance, the most recent incident where Russia is actively engaged in sending third country nationals towards the Finnish border to seek asylum, that they will cease this operation, because it's a very ruthless way of weaponizing people, and especially now that winter has come to Finland, where we face temperatures of even minus 20 degrees Celsius, and we have snow in Lapland, that they are sending people over with no appropriate clothing or equipment. It's just inhumane, and we ask Russia to stop this operation.
Well, I will get on to that in just a moment. But first, staying on the issue of defence, among the first big deals that you struck in this process of bolstering your defence, along with joining NATO, was the purchase of a high-altitude air defence system from Israel. It was a deal worth $346 million. The system is called David's Sling, capable of intercepting ballistic and cruise missiles, aircraft and drones. In continuing to see this deal through, given the current context of the war on Gaza, are you taking sides there as well?
The Finnish Defence Forces, and again, the emphasis is on the word defence, makes its decisions on procurement independently of outside world happenings, of course, in relation to the policy of our partners and allies, so the EU and NATO. And they are purchasing the equipment from where they find the best capabilities or the best equipment to support our capabilities. So it has nothing to do with the war ongoing in Gaza. And what comes to the situation in the Middle East, Finland is fully aligned with the European Union's position, where we demand humanitarian pauses, humanitarian corridors for the aid to reach the people. We urge both parties and all parties to value civilian lives and protect civilians. And we have also increased our level of aid significantly into the region. The European Union has quadrupled its aid to Gaza over the course of the past 6 weeks. So we are very concerned of what's going on, and we hope that the situation will come fast to a conclusion where there will be, again, an inception of talks for a lasting peace based on the two-state solution that we are supporting.
The opposition Left Alliance party in your country isn't happy with the defence deal with Israel. They demand that you call it off, saying it is not right to buy arms from a country that maintains an illegal occupation and is known to bomb civilians. Are you moved by that argument at all?
Finland is a democracy, and we have a multi-party system. We have now 9 parties in parliament, and one of those is indeed the Left Party. And in our country, all politicians have the right to also oppose the position of the government, which is a majority government, and this is normal politics.
Well, I want to stay on this just for a moment, because those opposition figures, and indeed there are others who would agree, might say that Israel is little different to Russia in the fact of maintaining an illegal occupation and bombing civilians, yet one you condemn, the other you do business with.
Well, we have actually been condemning Israel. It is the illegal settlements in the West Bank. Those are against international law, and we have been clearly stating our position. We have been also condemning the increasing violence that Israeli civilians are acting upon Palestinian civilians in those settlements, and we have urged Israel to stop. And we have no double standards here whatsoever. The Finnish and the European Union's position is crystal clear, and that is to protect civilians and to value human rights everywhere in the world.
Well, some people, I suspect, would argue that it's not right to be doing business with one of those countries and sanctioning heavily and refusing to have anything to do with the other. Should the EU, do you think, be worried that what is perceived as double standards, whether you agree or not that it is double standards, perceived by large parts of, let's say, the global south, for instance, might complicate EU efforts to take other countries along with it as it continues to pursue its Ukraine policy, that they might say, well, you can't keep telling us that Russia is this aggressor in Ukraine whilst continuing to essentially operate business as usual with Israel?
Well, first of all, we have been very loud and clear also on our Israel policy. Like just said, we are not definitely not accepting moves which are against the international law and especially not against humanitarian law. We also support the ICC, the International Criminal Court, in its effort to investigate all crimes which have been now undertaken over the past weeks in Gaza, and probably there are yet to come many. So Finland fully supports that work, independent of who commits those crimes.
Will you, as an individual member of the EU, forgive me, Foreign Minister, go so far as, say, France has done in calling for an absolute definitive ceasefire at this point?
We are hoping that now this deal that has been signed a few days, humanitarian pause in order for the aid to reach the civilians, that this could be a step towards a permanent ceasefire and also towards negotiations between the parties. We support a Palestinian Authority to negotiate for the Palestinian people, but it of course has to have the mandate of the Palestinian people.
And your view on the future beyond the war in Gaza? Is it to pursue a two-state solution? Is it to recognise a Palestinian state as soon as possible?
The Finnish position has been the same for a very long time, and that is that there needs to be a negotiated two-state solution, which will also lead to the recognition of the state of Palestine. And that negotiation needs to be based on the borders pre-1967. And this is definitely something that not only Finland but the European Union is keen to engage in helping those parties to establish those negotiations and to find a way for a peaceful future.
Let's go back to current events in your region, if I may. I want to ask you about your government's claim, you raised it earlier, that Russia is deliberately guiding refugees and asylum seekers to Finland's eastern border. Are you certain this is happening, and to what end do you believe it's happening? What's the purpose?
Well, we are very sure that this is happening. We haven't had asylum seekers from Russia, really. Well, we are talking a few incidents over the course of the past few years, up until the past few weeks, where Russia has been intentionally letting through people without valid documentation or with missing documentation altogether. And those people are coming mainly from third countries. We do also have evidence that not only is Russia letting those people pass to the Finnish border, but they have been also actively engaged in transporting those people to the border crossing stations. And what's more, we have also heard that Russia is apparently loosening its visa policy in many countries in order to allow for people to travel to Russia and through Russia towards the Finnish border and from there to the European Union. And obviously this is a case example of a hybrid operation where Russia is weaponizing people. We can't accept that, and we will have a rigid response like there has been over the course of the past 2 weeks from the Finnish government, but also we will do that together with our partners and allies.
Well, I want to talk about your response because it's been pretty drastic. At the beginning, instituting a new law that would allow the government to block asylum seekers at the border in certain circumstances. Then you went on to ban people travelling over the border by bicycle. And now, most recently, closing, I think, all but one of 9 border crossings between Russia and Finland. Not everybody entirely happy with that. The Finnish Refugee Council, for instance, saying the right to seek refuge must be respected regardless of where applicants come from or how they accessed the border. Essentially, that's an accusation that you're in breach of international humanitarian law.
Well, we are definitely not in breach of international humanitarian law. As said, we have been accepting and taking asylum seekers into our country.
Another point of view from a Finnish commentator, an academic at the University of Eastern Finland called Jussi Lane, who believes Helsinki is overreacting to a deliberate Russian attempt to stoke havoc, to create havoc, suggesting you're responding exactly the way Russia would like you to be.
Well, we can't speculate on how Russia would like us to respond, but we have to protect our citizens and our national security. And it's good that we are having this open debate. But the vast majority of Finns is very concerned about the situation and would like Russia to go back to adhering to the contracts between our two countries or adhering to international law and stop this hybrid operation.
Finally, Foreign Minister, Sweden has also given up its neutrality along with Finland, leaving just Austria, Ireland, Malta and Switzerland as the last four remaining neutral countries in Europe. There was a time and a place, essentially, for neutrality during the Cold War. They were buffer states or essential go-betweens between East and West. Is it the case now, post-Cold War and with a hot war happening in Europe, that the doctrine of neutrality has run its course, do you think?
Well, NATO is an alliance for defence and is not there to threaten anybody. It is there to secure the European security architecture and essentially a stable and secure future for the people residing in Europe. So therefore, it was a natural choice to take for Finland, for Sweden, maybe there's others as well. And certainly many of those countries who are within the European Union, except for Switzerland, of the countries you mentioned, we are far from being neutral ever since we signed the Lisbon Treaty in the EU. We have the obligation to help each other also in a possible crisis situation in Europe. So in a sense, this is nothing new. And again, not to threaten anybody, but secure a peaceful future for Europeans and for the rest of the world.
OK, Elina Valtonen, Foreign Minister of Finland, thanks for your time. Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much.